Well, I grew up the son of a man who was in the Royal Navy, and luckily he was able to send me away to school, and I started going away to school at the age of 5 and continued on through my education process on a boarding basis in various schools and on into universities. I did have one break in that for 2 years I took off between school and university. And my father gave me a small amount of money and a steerage ticket to Canada and says, come back in 2 years' time. So I had to learn what it was like to fend for myself and to occasionally feel quite hungry. I can tell you the winter in Canada, when you don't have somewhere to sleep and it's very cold and you don't have enough to eat, you do learn a few things from that, which I hope I've tried to give to all my 3 sons. They've always been more clever at it, dealing with it than I was. But I was lucky enough to be taught at university and had 2 of my tutors in the 3 years I was at Cambridge. Both went on to win Nobel Prizes. Not very much of that rubbed off on me, because I wasn't anything like clever enough for that sort of stuff. But to work with those people and to be taught by those people is a very lucky chance, and I'm very grateful to them and to all the other people who tried to put something into my funny little head. So that was how I grew up. Well, from the very beginning, I was taught by one of the great economists, Amartya Sen, who to me is perhaps the most important thinker in my life. And I recognized that working is quite fun if you can find the right things. And the things that you're working with enable you to work with good people and to do things in the right way. I had to spend a lot of my time earning enough money to send my children to school. And once you get beyond a certain point, then you can do things perhaps with a greater social input than the financial input which is necessary. So I found ever after that there was some mixture of social and commercial enterprise which gave you the best of both worlds and allowed you to meet a much broader group of interesting people than you would if you stuck in purely one or other sectors. And that remained right the way through. And certainly on the social side, which was mainly in what we call international development sphere, in some of the early works that I did in that left me feeling that too much of the development input was coming from people who didn't actually know what was going on the ground. I mean, I spent holidays working in organizations and I could see that while they were good people working hard, they hadn't spent enough time listening. And that was the basis where when I was invited by Cambridge University to see if I could help them in some way develop their interest in Africa, I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, I think there is a huge opportunity because the technology of modern communication, the interconnect between that and the more scientific side of Cambridge's social sciences and work on languages, that if we could put those together, there was a chance that we could improve the initial thinking of very bright, very nice people, but which seemed too often to miss the point. And they indicated that they had a very interesting man doing some research into that area, with whom I spent time. It's called Sharath Srinivasan, a very bright individual. And I talked to him for a reasonable length of time and said that if he could get Cambridge University's research funds to pay for half the research costs into working out how best we could put together the information technology, social science, languages, all of which they are very good at, in a development context, then we could see whether we could complete a project which would be available for people to use. When we got to the end of it, we got so excited, we thought, well, we better do it ourselves. And so I persuaded, or probably he persuaded Cambridge University that he, as a research project, could take time away from Cambridge and come and start it up on the background of some work he'd already done here in Kenya, in Kibera, and other places, in working and understanding what people thought there and how they interacted with the governance communities, people in the political scene who listened to the radio, and so that there was the beginning of a thought of conversations taking place that were not question and answers, but were genuine conversations that might happen between two people. Clearly, if this can take place among the least hard to reach parts of the community, that was a bonus, that they could happen in languages which not many people speak, but which could take place on a spontaneous basis. So we could listen into those discussions. We would be able to tell all these clever people who run the great development, whether national or international, we could give them a tool that they needed to have the humility to understand the voice of the people at the bottom of the pyramid are important. They aren't totally decisive, because like the rest of us, most of us can make pretty stupid comments, but in total, we would be able to listen to those conversations, as I say, with humility, to analyze those conversations in the context in which the conversations were made, and to understand them in a common language, which would mean we'd have to talk. Those discussions would take place in different languages, different dialects, so that they were genuine and not from people who are interviewed and who often will want to give the answers that the interviewer wants to hear. So it was an attempt, and that has been the basis of what we then set up as the Africa's Voices Foundation, where this particular individual, Sharath Srinivasan, came from Cambridge to do research here away from London, and he spent, I suppose it was about 3 years, based in Nairobi, which for various reasons we thought is a good focal point from which to do it. I think I'd hoped that we could get a greater diversity of places from which we worked than we have been able to as yet. As a result of Africa's Voices having developed further, we found ourselves being asked by the major donors to help them in fragile situations, and in particular in Somalia, where we've done a high proportion of our work. I would have liked to have spread it across more, but we've never had the funds to do it until now. And the problem was that while we have been working with a large number of the institutions that I think have the humility to listen and where we can help them, they tend to be institutions which find it difficult to pay us the full cost of the service. They will pay the costs of the individual bit of work that we do for them, but they will, in most cases, but not always. But we have our overheads, our research and development, our training of people, our running of an office, which are very difficult to recover on that basis. So we have always been short of money, and we have never been able to find many people from the outside who wish to do what they see as subsidizing major international institutions who, if they so fit, ought to be able to cover our full costs rather than our just direct costs. So I'm very proud of the range of people that we do work for, and we have done work for, and often repeat work for. You know, people like the World Bank, some of the UN agencies, the EU, the Danes, the Germans, the Swiss, all people who are hard-headed, and but I like to think that our ability to be able to tell, that's what the people on the ground who are trying to, what they really want, what they really think. And frankly, quite often they'll know better what they want than somebody sitting in New York or London, or even in the center of Nairobi. And if we can help put into context the thoughts of those people, not necessarily so that you can automatically do whatever they say, but you at least know what their views are in opinions which have been freely entered into in open conversation, and where the context, we can also, the context in which they're given in terms of where within a particular part of society they are. So that we can offer them several levels of analysis, all of which should add a sharpness to any decisions they take, any findings they make, and any new programs they may want to put into operation. So it's been an interesting exercise. I wish we were operating more broadly than we are. Well, I think we have demonstrated our worth, particularly in the fragile state of Somalia, and it may be we ought to move more broadly into other fragile states, but it takes quite a lot of initial investment to build up those things. But we're now at a point where we need to decide whether we have the resources to go on and build from what I think has been a hugely successful base into something where we can come closer to self-sufficiency than we have up till now, where the lack of available funds has made life constraining. We're always constrained by lack of money. But in this case, I think we have been left with a narrower base than I would want. We have on our board individuals who are experienced operators and who have told me voluntarily that they believe that whatever happens to AVF in the future, we have in some ways affected the thinking of a lot of people at the top of the social institutions, which will allow them to do a better job, even whether as a direct result of our help or just by doing that extra bit of listening that is so important, that we think we do particularly well. I think it is a sense of vision that I had when I started on this, which is derived from the work that I have done in both the public and private sectors, that the importance of listening with humility, and that if we can get more people, particularly those working for civil ends, do start off by listening and not by thinking that some wonderfully clever person has a frightfully bright idea, which if you only applied it more generally, the world would be better. That may be true, but somewhere within that exercise, you've got to spend time listening and understanding what those voices from the hardest to reach really want. Because if you're going to help them, you've got to work with the thoughts and ideas that they have, maybe modified, and that's an exciting thing to do. I think we have achieved a certain amount. I mean, it's an aspiration which is very broad and covers what's happening or not happening in over 100 countries. We have only been basically dealing with 2. We've occasionally slipped into a 3rd or 4th, but not in a major way. Now, what I would like to see happen is that people who worked with us go and move on into other areas and can either demand the sort of services we could give from us or other people, or alternatively can go somewhere themselves into spending more time hearing the opinions and the ideas of those who we all are there to, I don't think, just help, but to work with, to improve their lives. That's good fun. It's a very difficult one to judge. I noted that wearing a different hat, Somalia as a fragile state has seen some improvement over the last few years. I like to think that's entirely the result of the work that Africa's Voices has been doing. I don't believe that to be true, but some part of it may be. And I would like one day to see if we can do the research on to the extent to which those two do interrelate, and whether there is from that a lesson that we can apply far more broadly than just in that context. That's, if you like, pipe dream stuff. But I think we have to have those, if you like, aspirations to do more and better. I mean, one of the interesting things, not only in my work with Africa's Voices, but in other things in this space, I know that a lot of politicians do spend quite a lot of time listening to radio and are indeed influenced by it. And I think there is a great opportunity for all of us that as radio morphs into other forms of communication, as to how we can engage both the politicians and the people that they think they're trying to serve, to understand each other better, and that they should get the most pleasure they can out of the maximum interface between those who are making the decisions and those who are hopefully going to benefit from them. Underlying it will be, I think, humility on the behalf, particularly of the governments, to get the best use out of technology, whether it's radio, whether it's television, whether it's other forms of mass communication, that can allow us to get the unadulterated voice of others in society, and not through a lens which is perhaps not quite so, is not as unstructured and pure, because quite a lot of us, whether we're politicians or recipients, will speak from a point of view of immediate self-interest rather than the concern for the people around them. So let's hope we get there. And I hope the team at Africa Voices, in some way or another, can be an important part of that enterprise over the next few years. I think it has to be taken on by people that are younger and better than I. Samuel, who is running it on a day-to-day basis extremely well. we have one or two people on our board, and we need to find some more good young people who can help develop the thinking which may be in the social science field, and it may be in the technology field, because the real advantage that we were trying to work with was as the technology develops, the ability to communicate much more broadly. The internet is obviously the key to this. Telephony is another part of it. But how we can continue to develop the answers that comes out of that technology. Now, I am not up to date in terms of a lot of the technology, the hip-hops and the tic-tacs and the TikToks and all those other things, which has come after my time. But all out of those ideas, there must be ways in which we can capture the thoughts and turn those thoughts into activities and into programs for helping, in particular, the poorer people in the world to play a fuller part in what comes next. That's important. Well, I think it's in part what we think they should do, and it's in part just taking the whole experience one stage further, in which we have to listen to them as to what they think, in the light of what we've done in working with them, are going to be the ways. We aren't any more full of all the wisdom, and we have to listen to the donors and listen with the donors through to the recipients and the other people they're working with, so that we can devise new and better systems, that we can get the fullest possible understanding. That's the work for the next generation, and I shall wave my rattle from the sidelines and hope that they can go on into the future to do that better than perhaps we've done so far. Yeah. I think my only remarks would be, I think we've got some very good people who have had up to a decade now of experience in working in this area. I think they do create a pool of talent and experience through learning on the job that we would be very foolish not to use even more fully than it is at the moment. And I hope that in doing that, the whole team will derive a lot of pleasure from doing it.